Welcome back, guys, to Blackout War Stories. 66% of you still haven't subscribed. Before we start the video, hit that subscribe button. It only takes a second. It was late autumn of 1983 when we first saw it. The ridge itself wasn't unusual, just another Appalachian rise of stone and brush, sitting quietly above a forgotten Kentucky valley. But it was the way our compasses reacted that made the air tighten in our lungs. Every needle, no matter how we turned, swung and locked toward that hill. North, east, west. It didn't matter. The hill pulled everything in. I remember the silence after the first man noticed it. Sergeant Holloway frowned at his lensatic compass, tapped it once, then twice, muttering something about a busted needle. Private King laughed, pulled his own from his chest rig, and froze. Same result. Then I checked mine. The moment that black arrow snapped sideways and clung to the outline of the hill, I felt something settle in my gut. Not awe, not curiosity, but a kind of dread that didn't loosen. The Army taught us to trust the compass more than our eyes, more than our sense of direction. But what happens when every compass points to something you're standing in front of? What happens when the earth itself seems to bend? We weren't supposed to be out there. Officially, our unit was on a navigation exercise. In truth, we'd been sent with a sealed packet of orders from battalion headquarters. No questions asked, no paperwork filed, just coordinates, a time window, and instructions not to speak of it to anyone outside the platoon. Even back then, I understood what that meant. This was classified before it even started. The hill itself looked ordinary. Scrub trees clawed at the slope, and limestone jutted in gray ribs from the soil. But as the minutes passed, we realized something else. The air near the base tasted metallic, like old pennies. Some of the men said their radios hissed with a constant low buzz, even on unused frequencies. "Magnetic anomaly," Holloway whispered, but his tone didn't carry belief. I walked a few paces closer, boots crunching on loose rock. My skin prickled as if the very air carried static, and then I heard it, faint, almost swallowed by the wind. A hum, low and steady, rising from somewhere inside the hill. I turned to call the others, but their faces told me they'd heard it too. Whatever was inside that hill wasn't meant to be found, and yet every compass needle insisted we couldn't look away. That was the night the first man vanished. The night Private King vanished, we were camped just east of the hill. None of us had wanted to pitch tents closer. The place carried a weight, as if the ground itself resented our presence. The hum hadn't stopped since sundown, faint, steady, like machinery buried under stone. We bedded down in pairs. I shared a foxhole-sized depression with Corporal Hensley, my closest friend in the platoon. We'd grown up less than 50 miles apart, though we hadn't known each other before the Army. In the dark, Hensley whispered that he couldn't shake the taste of iron in his mouth. I told him it was just nerves, though the truth was, I felt it too. At first light, Holloway gathered us. His face was pale, lips pressed thin. "King's gone," he said. No ceremony, just those words. His sleeping bag was empty, his boots left behind, but his rifle was missing. No footprints led away, not in the damp earth. It was as if he'd been lifted straight out of the camp. Some of the men muttered about desertion, but not me. King was young, yes, but he wasn't the type to walk away, not with his rifle and nothing else. Besides, we were days from the nearest town. Where would he have gone? Holloway didn't waste time. He told us we were splitting into teams, searching the slope of the hill. Orders, he claimed, came from above. None of us had seen a courier, a radio message, nothing. Still, we didn't argue. In the Army, you don't question where orders come from, you just follow them. As we moved closer, I couldn't help noticing how the forest seemed wrong. The bird song cut out near the base, leaving only wind-rattling branches. The hum grew stronger. It seemed to vibrate in my chest. Hensley swore he felt it in his teeth. We climbed in silence, each step heavy with unspoken questions. I kept my hand on the M16 slung across my chest, though what I expected to shoot at, I didn't know. Halfway up the slope, we found the first sign, a scrap of King's poncho liner, torn and snagged on a low branch. No blood, no tracks, Just that square of green nylon swaying in the breeze. Trail, Holloway muttered, but he didn't sound convinced. We pressed on, circling the hill in a loose formation. That's when we discovered something stranger than King's disappearance. The compasses didn't just point to the hill, they spun in circles at certain spots, as if the metal in the ground had a pulse, tugging the needles in waves. I tried to joke about it, but the words died in my throat. Nothing about this place was funny. That evening, as we regrouped at the base, Holloway read aloud from a folded sheet of paper. None of us had seen him open an envelope or receive new instructions, yet he held the page like it had always been in his pocket. He told us headquarters wanted us to set up a perimeter and remain until further notice. No mention of King, no mention of the anomaly, just maintain presence. We built a rough camp with sandbags and tripods for the machine guns. It looked ridiculous, a forward outpost with no enemy. Still, we followed orders. The army was good at teaching men to build forts in places where no one should be. That night I couldn't sleep. The hum seemed louder. I lay staring at the canvas of the tent, listening. Around 2 in the morning, I heard someone walking outside. Not the shuffle of boots, but a measured, heavy step. I gripped my rifle and peeked out. The campfire had burned low, throwing weak orange light. Shadows stretched long against the slope. For a moment, I swore I saw a figure halfway up the hill, tall, rigid, unmoving. I blinked and it was gone. I told myself it was the dark playing tricks. But the unease stayed. At dawn, 2 more men reported hearing footsteps. None of us admitted seeing the figure, but I could tell by their faces that they felt it too. We ate cold rations in silence. Hensley cracked a joke about the chili mac being worse than enemy fire, and a few men laughed, but the sound rang hollow. The humor couldn't mask the truth. We were all thinking the same thing. King wasn't coming back, and the hill wasn't finished with us. 3 days passed without fresh orders. Radios sputtered with static. Holloway claimed he was still receiving coded updates, though no one else heard a thing. Each night the hum deepened, and each morning more men admitted they hadn't slept. On the 4th day, Private Delgado snapped. He threw his compass against a rock, shattering the glass, and shouted that the hill was alive. Holloway pinned him down, barked at us to restrain him. Delgado kicked and screamed until the medic dosed him with a sedative. When he finally slept, Holloway turned to us. His voice was calm, but his eyes burned. This place is testing us. If any of you lose discipline, you'll endanger the rest. Keep your mouths shut and your rifles ready. The men nodded, but I caught Hensley's glance. He didn't believe Holloway any more than I did. Something was wrong with our orders. Something was wrong with Holloway. That night, while the others slept, I crept outside the perimeter wire. I just needed air, distance from the camp. The hill loomed above, black against the stars. And again I thought I saw movement, a figure standing perfectly still at the tree line. Watching? I raised my rifle, finger tight on the trigger. My heart hammered so loud I swore it would give me away. But before I could act, the figure stepped back into the dark. And just like that, it was gone. I don't know if it was King or someone else entirely, but I knew one thing for certain. Whatever had taken him was still out there, waiting. And we were next. By the 5th day on that hill, the unit no longer felt like the same group of men that had hiked in. We still wore the same uniforms, still carried the same rifles, but the looks in our eyes were different. No one cracked jokes anymore. No one talked about going home or what they'd do with their next paycheck. The only thing we thought about was the hill and the way it seemed to breathe around us. We weren't supposed to be there that long. Navigation exercises usually lasted 2, maybe 3 days. By day 5, our rations were thinning out, our water had gone stale, and the silence from headquarters was louder than gunfire. Holloway swore he was receiving coded transmissions at night, but no one else heard a thing. We stopped asking questions. Something had shifted in him. The sergeant who once barked orders and lit cigarettes with a grin now barely spoke, except to recite orders none of us had seen written down. He would disappear for hours at a time, always heading toward the hill's slope. When we asked, he claimed to be scouting, but his boots carried no mud or leaves when he returned. Hensley whispered one night that he thought Holloway was lying. I wanted to disagree, but I couldn't. The way Holloway's eyes locked on the hill, the way he spoke in clipped sentences, it felt less like he was leading us and more like he was waiting for something. On the 6th morning, we lost another man, Private Connors. He'd been on guard duty at the Western Post. At sunrise, we found his rifle propped neatly against a sandbag, his helmet lying beside it. No footprints led away. Just like King, it was as if he had been lifted from the earth. The medic swore up and down Connors wasn't the type to desert. I believed him. Connors was steady, the kind of soldier who kept his boots polished, even in the field. But Holloway told us otherwise. He claimed Connors had been weak, that he'd failed the test. What test? I asked. Holloway just looked at me, silent. By now, the compasses were more than useless. They spun wildly near the base, then froze hard toward the summit whenever we tried to pull back. It was like standing on a giant magnet. We started joking about it again, but not the way soldiers usually joke. These weren't jokes for laughter. They were cracks in the dam, muttered words to keep us from drowning in fear. I swear the damn hill wants us to climb it, Delgado muttered once he'd recovered from his breakdown. Like it's calling us. Nobody argued. We all felt it. That night, everything came apart. Around midnight, the tripwire clattered and the flares went up. We scrambled for rifles, expecting insurgents, militia, anything human. But the woods were empty. The light from the flare bled over the trees, and for just a second I saw them. Figures, 3, maybe 4, standing at the tree line. They didn't move. They didn't run. They just stood there, shadows against the red light. Hensley opened fire. The rest of us followed, rounds ripping through the brush. When the flare fizzled out, silence fell again. No screams, no bodies. Nothing but shredded bark and gun smoke. When dawn broke, we searched. No blood, no tracks, not even a snapped twig. Holloway ordered us not to speak of it again. But how could we not? We'd all seen the same thing. And worse, when we checked our ammunition, half our belts and magazines were gone. We were wasting supplies on shadows. The men started turning on each other after that. Delgado accused Hensley of spooking everyone with wildfire. Hensley shot back that Delgado had already cracked once and shouldn't even be carrying a weapon. The arguments grew louder each day. At one point, Private Morgan pulled me aside and whispered that Holloway wasn't just lying, he was in contact with someone. Morgan swore he'd seen him speaking into the radio with the handset unplugged. I wanted to dismiss it, but part of me believed it. I remembered how Holloway returned from those long absences with clean boots. I remembered the way he never looked surprised at anything we found, as if he already knew what was there. On the 8th day, we found the entrance. It was Hensley who spotted it first, an opening half hidden behind limestone boulders near the northern slope, wide enough for a man to walk through crouched. The hum was louder there. No one wanted to admit it, but we all felt it in our bones. It vibrated through the rock, through our boots. The smell of metal was thick. Holloway didn't hesitate. Perimeter here. We'll explore in teams at nightfall. At nightfall, that struck me as insane. Why not wait until daylight? But Holloway was beyond question now. We set up camp just outside the entrance. No one slept. Some of the men swore they heard whispers drifting out of the dark, words too soft to catch. Others claimed they felt a pull, like gravity leaning them forward. At midnight, Holloway ordered us inside. We filed in, rifles raised, headlamps cutting weak beams across damp stone. The walls glistened with moisture. The air was heavy, almost wet, and smelled like rusted iron. The hum was deafening now. It came from deeper within, steady as a heartbeat. We walked single file, every step echoing. After 50 yards, the tunnel opened into a chamber the size of a church. The ceiling arched high above, lined with jagged stone. And in the center, half buried in the floor, was something I still struggle to describe. Metal, smooth, curved, not natural, not shaped by water or time. It looked like the edge of something enormous, something buried under the hill. Holloway stepped forward like he'd been expecting it. None of us spoke, not until Delgado whispered, "That's not ours." No one disagreed. We turned to Holloway waiting for answers. He didn't give any. Instead, he told us to post guards at the entrance and return in shifts. His tone left no room for argument. But later, when the men drifted back to camp, I stayed behind, hidden in the shadows. I watched Holloway kneel by the buried metal and place his hand against it. He didn't move for minutes. Then he whispered something, words too low to hear. When he finally turned, I ducked out of sight. But I'd seen enough. Holloway knew what this was. He knew before we ever stepped foot on that hill. By the 10th day, the platoon was breaking apart. Some wanted to leave, to march back to base regardless of orders. Others, especially those who'd stood closest to the chamber, refused to go. They claimed we had a duty to stay, to guard whatever was under the hill. Arguments turned to shoves. Hands drifted to rifles. Holloway did nothing to stop it. He just stood, eyes fixed on the slope, like the hill itself was giving him instructions. That night I woke to voices. Not whispers this time, but full conversation. Holloway and someone else, just outside camp. I crept closer, rifle in hand. But when I stepped out, he was alone. "Who are you talking to?" I demanded. Holloway stared at me for a long moment. Then he smiled, thin and cold. "You wouldn't understand." And he walked away. We were soldiers without orders, stranded in a valley no map explained, with a hill that pulled every compass needle and buried something not of this earth, or at least not of our making. One man gone, then another. Whispers in the night. Shadows at the tree line. By then, I knew the hill wasn't just testing us, it was changing us. And Holloway wasn't our sergeant anymore. He was something else, something tied to whatever lived beneath the rock. The breaking point came on the 11th night, because that was when one of us finally raised a rifle. Not at shadows, not at whispers, but at another man. The shot wasn't loud at first. It cracked once, flat against the hillside, then rolled through the trees like thunder. Every man in the camp froze. Some scrambled for cover, others raised rifles, not even sure where to point them. It was Delgado. He stood near the fire pit, his hands shaking, barrel smoking. The muzzle of his M16 had been aimed at Corporal Morgan. The bullet had missed by inches, splintering a tree trunk instead. Morgan was on him in seconds, slamming Delgado against a log. "You trying to kill me?" he shouted, spittle flying. Delgado's eyes were wide, sweat pouring down his face. "You don't hear them? They're telling you lies, Morgan. You're with them, aren't you?" The camp erupted. Men shouted over one another, rifles half raised, fingers white on the triggers. For the first time, I saw our platoon not as a unit, but as armed strangers ready to tear each other apart. Holloway stepped forward, voice calm, steady. "Weapons down." Now, the tone wasn't barked like a normal order. It was quiet, almost gentle. But every man froze. Slowly, rifles lowered. Morgan let Delgado go, though his jaw was clenched tight. Holloway looked at Delgado for a long time, then simply said, "You're not wrong, but your aim is not wrong." Those two words stuck in my head all night. The platoon split after that. There were the ones who trusted Holloway without question, Morgan, King before he vanished, and three others who had started spending more and more time near the cavern. Then there were men like me, Hensley, and a few who wanted nothing more than to march out and never look back. Delgado was caught somewhere between, twitching at every shadow, muttering about voices. Meals became silent. Guard shifts felt like punishments. Every laugh was forced, brittle, dying quick. The hill wasn't just pulling compasses anymore. It was pulling us apart. One afternoon, while Holloway and his loyal men were inside the cavern, I searched his tent. I knew it was reckless, but the mistrust had grown too heavy to ignore. Beneath his bedroll, hidden inside a ration tin, I found it, a small field radio. But it wasn't tuned to our usual frequency. The dial was twisted all the way to a range I'd never seen used in training. A faint signal hissed, steady as the hum from the hill. I pressed the receiver to my ear. At first, just static, then faint, distant voices. Not English, not any language I recognized. The words rolled low, deliberate, almost mechanical. The sound turned my stomach. I shoved the radio back into its hiding place, heart racing. When I told Hensley later, he stared at me for a long time, then asked, "Are you sure you heard it?" "Not just static?" "I know what I heard," I whispered. And that was the first time I admitted it out loud. Holloway wasn't following orders. He was taking them from somewhere else. On the 12th day, Holloway gathered us. He said the cavern wasn't just a discovery, it was an assignment. He claimed we were to dig, to clear more of the buried metal. The men groaned, but none refused. We hacked at limestone with entrenching tools, chipped at stubborn stone until our hands blistered. The more we uncovered, the stranger it looked. Not a rock formation, not even wreckage. It was curved, precise, with lines and grooves etched into its surface like symbols. Delgado collapsed halfway through the shift, mumbling about his teeth aching. Hensley pulled him back to camp, while the rest of us kept digging. By evening, we had exposed enough to see that the buried object wasn't small. It stretched further under the hill, massive, endless. And the hum, it was louder than ever. That night, Morgan approached me while I was on watch. His face was pale, his hands trembling. He said he couldn't sleep, not since the cavern. "They talk to me," he whispered, not out loud. Inside. I wanted to brush it off, but the way his eyes darted made my skin crawl. "They tell me Holloway is the bridge," he continued, "that he'll lead us where we're meant to go." I told him he sounded crazy. He just smiled, a hollow smile that didn't reach his eyes, and walked away. For the rest of my shift, I couldn't shake the thought, what if he wasn't lying? On the morning of the 13th day, Delgado was gone. His rifle was still in camp, his boots by his cot. Just like King, just like Connors. No tracks, no sound in the night. But this time, something was different. By his sleeping bag, scratched into the dirt with a fingernail or knife, were 3 words: "It wants more." Hensley cursed when he saw it. "This is wrong. We need to leave tonight." I wanted to agree, but Holloway gathered us instead, voice calm as always, and said, "Delgado has been taken where he belongs. The rest of you will follow soon enough." No one challenged him, not openly, but I saw the fear in their faces. That evening, Hensley and I whispered about running. We had enough rations left for 2, maybe 3 days if we rationed hard. If we marched due east, maybe we could find a road, a farmhouse, something. But before we could settle on it, Morgan appeared behind us. He hadn't meant to eavesdrop. He said he'd been listening, and he warned us not to try. "You don't leave," he said, his voice flat. "The hill doesn't let you." Hensley bristled. "What the hell does that mean?" Morgan just smiled, the same hollow smile from before, and walked back toward the cavern. By the 14th day, more of the buried object was exposed. The grooves carved into it weren't random. They formed repeating patterns, symbols none of us could read. Holloway ran his hands along them like scripture. When Hensley asked him what they meant, Holloway answered without hesitation, "They're instructions." The word sent a chill through me. Instructions for what? That night, while on guard, I looked back toward the cavern and saw Holloway kneeling by the metal again. Only this time, he wasn't alone. Morgan knelt beside him, hand resting on the surface, lips moving as if in prayer. For the first time, I realized they weren't just following orders. They were worshiping. On the 15th day, Hensley grabbed my arm and pulled me behind a stand of trees. His face was tight, voice low. "We're leaving. Tonight, just you and me. No one else." I didn't argue. The hill had taken King, Connors, Delgado. It had Holloway and Morgan in its grip. We couldn't wait for it to claim the rest. We made our plan. Sneak out under cover of dark, move fast, no looking back. But before we could act, Holloway called us all together. He stood tall, eyes burning with something I can't describe, and said, "Tomorrow we go inside, all of us. The chamber's ready." The words hung heavy in the cold night air. Tomorrow, inside. I looked at Hensley and I knew, if we didn't leave tonight, we'd never leave at all. That night I barely breathed. Every second felt like it could break the silence and bring Holloway down on us. Hensley and I waited until the camp was still, until the faint snores of exhausted men filled the air. The hum from the cavern rolled under everything, steady and low like a living thing. We had our packs half ready already, stripped down to essentials, canteens, a few ration packs, extra ammo. Nothing that would slow us. The plan was simple. Slip out east, make distance before dawn, and pray the compasses failed far enough away to give us direction. When Hensley tapped my shoulder, it was time. We crawled past the last sandbag line, careful not to kick the tripwires. The night was cold, but sweat still ran down my neck. I kept my rifle low, finger brushing the trigger guard, eyes darting at every shadow. The forest seemed alive, watching. We made it 20 yards into the trees when a voice cut the night. "Going somewhere?" It was Morgan. He stepped out of the dark like he'd been waiting, rifle slung across his chest. His smile wasn't cruel. It was worse. Calm, almost sad. Hensley raised his weapon. "Get out of our way!" Morgan didn't flinch. "You can't leave." "None of us can. The hill doesn't let you." I whispered. "Then why are you out here?" He tilted his head. "Because Holloway knew you'd try." He told me to watch. The calm in his tone made my skin crawl. Hensley's jaw clenched. "I swear, Morgan, step aside." Morgan looked straight at me then, ignoring Hensley. "You feel it too." "Don't lie, it's not fear, it's calling. You know it." For half a second I did feel it, the pull in my chest, the hum in my bones, but I shoved it down. "Move," I said. His answer was a whisper. "Tomorrow you'll understand." And then he melted back into the trees, leaving us frozen. We could have kept going, but something in that moment broke Hensley. His rifle lowered. "If they're watching the tree line, we won't make it," he muttered. I wanted to argue, but deep down I knew he was right. We turned back, slipping into camp before the night rotated shifts. We never spoke of the attempt again, but the weight of that failure sat heavy in my chest. At dawn, Holloway called us together. His voice carried no anger, no triumph, just certainty. "It's time." We marched into the cavern in single file. Headlamps flickered against stone walls. The air was colder than outside, but thicker too, like breathing through wet cloth. The chamber loomed ahead, that buried curve of metal exposed even further, its surface etched with those unreadable grooves. Some men touched it as they passed, fingers lingering like pilgrims brushing a shrine. Hensley and I stayed close. Neither of us spoke. Holloway stood in the center, hand pressed to the surface. "This is why we're here," he said softly. "This is what we were chosen for." The hum grew louder, so loud I felt it behind my eyes. My teeth ached, my stomach twisted. "Chosen for what?" I finally asked. My voice cracked against the stone. Holloway turned, his face pale, eyes bright like fever. "To guard the gate." Gate. That word hit harder than a bullet. Suddenly the chamber shuddered. Dust rained from the ceiling. Men stumbled, rifles clattering against stone. The hum spiked into a grinding roar. One of the privates screamed, clutching his head. Another dropped his rifle and ran toward the exit. But before he reached it, he froze, completely still. I watched in horror as his body jerked once, like a puppet tugged by strings, and then he walked back, slow, stiff, toward the buried metal. His eyes were blank. "Stay back," Hensley shouted, raising his weapon. But Holloway's voice cut through the chaos. "Don't interfere. He belongs now." The private pressed his hand against the metal. A flash of light burst from under his palm, blinding white. When it faded, he was gone. Nothing left but his rifle clattering to the floor. Men screamed, stumbling back. Some raised rifles at Holloway. Others turned them on the walls, firing into stone as if bullets could kill the hum itself. I froze. My hands shook so bad I could barely grip my weapon. Hensley snapped first. He turned his rifle on Holloway. "What the hell did you bring us into?" he roared. Holloway didn't even flinch. "You can't stop it. None of us can." Hensley's finger tightened on the trigger, but before he could fire, Morgan shoved him aside. The shot went wide, sparking off the metal. The chamber roared again, louder than thunder. I don't know what drove me then. Fear, rage, maybe desperation. But I leveled my own rifle, not at Holloway, not at Morgan, but at the buried object itself. And I fired. The sound was deafening. Bullets sparked against the surface, but instead of ricocheting, they sank with a hiss like hot knives into ice. The grooves lit up, glowing pale blue. The hum turned into a howl. The ground shook. Men stumbled, shouting, firing blindly. Holloway screamed, not in pain, but in fury. "You fool!" It wasn't ready. The chamber walls split with cracks. Rocks tumbled from above. The whole hill groaned like it was alive, waking up. "Hensley, move!" I shouted. We bolted for the tunnel, shoving past panicked men. Some followed, others stayed, drawn back toward the light spilling from the metal. I didn't look back until we reached the mouth of the cavern. Smoke and dust poured out behind us. Inside, I could still hear Holloway's voice, calm amid the chaos. "Stay with it. Stay with me." Then the sound of collapsing stone swallowed his words. We stumbled into daylight. The hill trembled under our boots. Birds burst from the treetops, shrieking. Hensley gasped for air. "What the hell was that?" I didn't answer. I couldn't, because part of me already knew. We hadn't destroyed it. We'd woken it. By dusk, the shaking stopped. The hum faded. The forest grew still again. Too still. Of the platoon, only 6 of us remained outside the cavern. The rest, gone. Either vanished into the metal, buried under the collapse, or both. We set up a ragged camp, too afraid to move, too drained to argue. No one spoke Holloway's name. No one dared. That night, I lay awake staring at the stars, wondering if the ground beneath me was hollow. Wondering if Delgado's final words had been right. It wants more. And deep down, I feared he hadn't meant just soldiers. We were pawns on a hill no map recorded, standing guard over something older, something waiting. And I couldn't shake the feeling that Holloway hadn't been crushed at all, that maybe in the dark beneath the stone, he was still speaking, still listening, still waiting for us to follow. The morning after the cavern collapsed, the air felt hollow. No birds sang, no insects buzzed, even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The 6 of us who survived sat in a half circle around cold ashes, rifles across our knees, staring at nothing. No one spoke about Holloway. No one spoke about the others. The weight of silence was enough to crush us. Hensley was the first to break it. His voice was hoarse, his eyes sunken. "We can't stay here. If that thing's still alive under the hill..." He trailed off, swallowing hard. Private Carter shook his head. He was the youngest left, barely 20. "What if leaving's worse? What if it follows us?" I didn't know how to answer. The hum was gone, but its echo still lived in us. By noon, we packed what little was left and started east. No compass, no radio. Just our boots and whatever sense of direction we still had. The march was slow, every step heavy. We expected the ground to shake again, or for Holloway to appear from the trees with that same calm smile. We didn't talk much. When we did, it was clipped, sharp, like men too close to breaking. "Think they'll believe us?" Carter asked once. "No," Hensley said flatly, "and don't tell them anyway." 2 days later, we stumbled across a dirt road. Relief hit so hard I nearly dropped to my knees. We followed it until we saw a convoy waiting. Trucks, jeeps, and men in uniforms. Not like ours. No unit patches, no names. Just plain fatigues, black boots, blank faces. They didn't look surprised to see us. They looked like they'd been expecting us. A man in a pressed jacket stepped forward. His hair was silver, his face lined, but his eyes were sharp. He didn't salute, didn't ask names. He just said, "You were never there." None of us answered. "You'll ride with us?" he continued. "You'll be debriefed. Then you'll go back to your unit and you'll keep your mouths shut. Understood?" We nodded, too drained to resist. They drove us to a facility miles from anywhere. Gray walls, no signs, no flags. Inside, they split us into separate rooms. A man in a suit, not military, not really, sat across from me. He didn't ask about King or Connors or Delgado. He didn't ask about Holloway. He only asked one thing. "What did you see?" I told him about the compasses, the hum, the cavern, the metal. My voice shook, but I spoke plain. He listened without blinking, then slid a paper across the table. It was a statement already typed out, neat and sterile. It said we'd been on a routine navigation exercise, that 2 men deserted, and that the rest returned without incident. At the bottom was a blank line for my signature. I looked up. "That's not what happened." His eyes narrowed. "It's what you'll say happened. For your own sake." I signed. After 3 days, they released us. Not back to our platoon, straight to new assignments. Hensley shipped to Germany, Carter to Fort Hood. I was sent to an office job stateside, away from the field. It was clear they wanted us scattered, silenced, erased. Months later, I tried asking around about Holloway, about the others. Nothing. No records, no mentions. Their names had been scrubbed clean. like they'd never existed. One night, I drank too much and tried to talk to an old sergeant I trusted. The moment I mentioned Kentucky, his face hardened. He told me to stop. "For your own good," he said. That was the last time I ever tried. Only Hensley wrote after. Short letters, never naming the hill, just hints. "Do you still hear it? Nightmares again this month." I'd write back the same way. Neither of us dared write the word hill. 2 years later, his letter stopped. I don't know if he transferred or if someone made sure he never wrote again. Carter, he didn't last long either. Word reached me that he'd taken his own life. His parents received a folded flag and a letter about non-combat circumstances. That left me. The hum never left. At first, it was only in dreams. I'd wake drenched in sweat, ears ringing, convinced I was back in the cavern. Sometimes I'd see Holloway, standing in the dark, lips moving with no sound. Other times it was the missing men, eyes blank, hands pressed against invisible walls. But over the years, the hum crept into waking hours too. When a fridge kicked on, when a plane passed overhead, when the power lines buzzed, always the same pitch, the same steady rhythm. I tried convincing myself it was memory, trauma, nothing more. But sometimes I could swear it was pulling again. In 1987, while working in supply, I stumbled across a stack of misfiled papers. At the bottom was a single page stamped classified. It was dated 4 years earlier, the same month we'd been in Kentucky. The title read, "Magnetic Anomaly Survey, Appalachian Sector." The details were vague, but the coordinates matched. In the margin was a handwritten note, "Containment ongoing, site sealed, personnel absorbed." I shoved the page back and closed the drawer. My hands shook for an hour. Personnel absorbed. I never went looking again. Decades passed. I left the Army, married, tried to live a normal life, but the silence never sat right. I'd drive past wooded hills and feel my stomach knot. I'd hear static on the radio and my throat would tighten. And sometimes in the dead of night, I'd dream of Holloway's face, calm, certain, waiting. It always ended the same way, with his voice whispering the same words he said in that cavern. "You were chosen to guard the gate." Even now, I don't know if he meant the 6 of us who survived or all of us who still carry the memory. Maybe both. I've asked myself 1,000 times, why us? Why that hill? Was it accident or design? Did someone know what was buried before we ever marched there? The compasses didn't just fail, they led us straight to it, like something wanted us to find it, like it had been waiting. And if that's true, if what we found wasn't just under that hill but under others, then Kentucky was only the beginning. Sometimes when I sit alone, I wonder about the men who stayed in that cavern, the ones who pressed their hands against the metal and vanished. Were they destroyed or taken somewhere else? And Holloway, if he truly believed he was the bridge, if he truly thought he was serving something greater, then maybe he didn't die when the rocks came down. Maybe he stepped through, just like the others. The thought chills me, but part of me hopes it's true. Because if he's still out there, maybe he's keeping whatever waits on the other side from crossing back. But if he isn't, if he was only the first to go, then maybe it's only a matter of time. And that's what keeps me up at night. It's been over 40 years since that hill. Most days I try to push it out of my mind, but it always finds its way back. It comes back in dreams or in small signs. A compass twitch, a hum in the wires, silence too heavy. I've told you everything as plain as I can. No frills, no exaggeration, just how it happened. I'm not proud of running when we should have fought harder, and I'm not proud of signing those papers that erased the truth. But I was young, we all were, and the Army taught us survival first, questions later. The men I served with, most of them are gone now in one way or another. Some were erased by that hill, others faded out in silence like Hensley. I'm still here, but I'm not the same man who marched into those woods. I never was again. The part that sticks isn't the vanishings, or even Holloway's strange calm. It's the way the whole thing was buried afterward. Not just under stone, but under paperwork, under silence, as if someone had a plan for it long before we stumbled in. That's the real horror of it. Not the unknown itself, but knowing someone, somewhere, already knew. I wonder about the others who disappeared. Did they die in that chamber or step into something else? When the light swallowed them, were they destroyed or moved? And if moved, to where? Sometimes I catch myself hoping they found peace, somewhere beyond us. Other times I'm sure they're still trapped, still pressed against that metal wall, waiting. And Holloway, God help me, I still see his face in my sleep. Not angry, not fearful, just certain, like he'd known from the start. I used to hate him for leading us there. Now I can't decide if he was a traitor, a fool, or the only one who understood what we were standing on. You might ask why I'm saying this now after all these years. Maybe it's age. Maybe it's the weight of carrying it alone. Or maybe it's because I've seen things lately, reports, headlines, whispers, that make me think the hill wasn't unique. Magnetic anomalies, compass failures, routine surveys in places no one talks about afterward. Always the same pattern, silence, then denial. I see the same blank faces now as I did back then, the same men in plain fatigues with no names on their jackets. They don't age, they don't change. And I wonder, how many other hills are out there, pulling at needles, waiting for soldiers to stumble close? If it had ended in Kentucky, maybe I'd forget. But I know it didn't. The compasses pointed toward it like they'd been answering a call. And if that's true, if that call is still going out, then someone or something will answer. I fear it won't need Holloway next time, or soldiers, or secrecy. It'll need all of us. People always ask veterans if they'd do it all again. If I had the choice to march into those woods knowing what waited there, would I? I've thought about that a lot. My answer is always the same: number. Not because I was afraid, but because what we found wasn't ours to find. It wasn't meant for us, and the cost of touching it was too high. But the truth is, whether I'd go again doesn't matter, because whatever that thing was, it's still under there. Maybe deeper, maybe buried, but not gone. And buried things don't stay buried forever. So if someday you hear about a compass gone strange, or a hum under the ground that no one can explain, don't go looking, don't follow, don't think you're the first to find it. Because I was there, I saw what it does, and I know with every bone in my body that it's still waiting.